a legitimate powerhouse and force for educational and social change right here in front of me. Could you please tell the world, sir, your name, your profession, and a little bit about your company called Exposure U?
Okay. Well, thanks for having me, Justin. My name is Jahquan Hawkins. I am a college success coach at Exposure U. Exposure U really spawned from a time about 20 years ago when I was going through undergrad myself at Wayne State University. Students fresh out of DPS didn't quite understand what the expectation of was for me as a college student, and struggled mightily as an incoming freshman at Wayne State. I walked away from my freshman year with a 1.7 cumulative GPA. That's kind of difficult to do, but I did it. You have to really try to get a 1.7 as a freshman at Wayne State University, but I did it. But thankfully, because people invested in me, people saw promise in me, people saw a lot of potential in me, I was able to recover from that. But I understand that a lot of students don't have the same support system that I had around me. I have friends that cared about me. I have family that cared about my academic well-being. And I had some really good mentors as an undergraduate at Wayne State. And so what we do at Exposure U is we coach students on what it means to actually make the transition from high school to college. Okay, what are you going to have to do differently, both personally and professionally, as you make this investment in your career and in your education? What are the expectation levels in the classroom as pertains to reading your college level textbooks, being prepared to answer questions, being participatory in class, and collaborating with your teammates? Because I look at your classmates not only as individuals you sit next to in a class, but they're also your teammates, because we don't get through a 4-year degree, a master's degree, and or PhD by ourselves. We do it as a collective. And so Exposure U is really there to coach you along the way in terms of getting you from that start point to the various checkpoints throughout the college career to ultimately graduating.
Very pertinent program, because it's imperative, to be able to bridge that gap, because high school is one entity, one institution, and college is such a different institution of learning.
Absolutely.
And so and what the world may know or may not know is how much of a well-rounded individual you are, and you're working in other realms. And I know that you and Mr. Anderson work together closely at a local college. And so if you could you tell us about some of the experiences you had with Greg, working with him and his work ethic?
Well, Greg is someone I consider to be an agent of change. I've seen change in Greg myself, a very positive change in that, when we first met, Greg had a lot of ideas, a lot of grandiose ideas. And that's what really kind of ingratiated me toward Greg, because I understood that in order to make those ideas a reality, it was going to require that we tapered those ideas down a little bit and that we narrowed the focus. And he was open to doing that. A lot of folks, when they have great ideas, they own those ideas. They want to hold on to them. They don't want anybody stealing their cheese. And so, what I appreciated about Greg was the fact that he was willing to take the constructive criticism. He actually welcomed the constructive criticism in written form, verbal form. He didn't let me beat him up at all, but he did say, you know what? Tell me the real. Am I barking up the right tree? Am I going about this the right way? And we were able to make a lot of inroads in terms of seeing him grow personally and professionally as well. And so a couple of programs that we were able to participate in together included the Man Up program here at OCC, where Greg actually served as one of our co-instructors for our academic success skills course.
Nice.
And, peer-to-peer mentoring is so much more effective. Even though I have over 10 years of higher ed professional experience, some of the things that I may say to a 15 or 16-year-old in high school just isn't going to resonate the same way as it will, with someone who's a little bit closer to their age. And so I appreciated Greg being in the class, but I needed Greg in that class to be that voice of that generation. And so the students really appreciated him being there. They respected his comments, his criticisms of them, because they knew that it was genuine and it was in the spirit of their best interest. And so I appreciated him participating in that program. That was a 12-week program that we run here at OCC for young males in Oak Park Public Schools and Southfield Public Schools every winter semester. And so that was my first contact with Greg on a professional level. Most recently, we brought Greg back after he graduated from OCC, and he led a workshop with the same Man Up program, but a different cohort, on the importance of college, but also creating a sense of urgency as pertains to your personal and professional goals. And oftentimes, folks will say, hey, I want to be successful. I want to make $1 million, or I want to be an entrepreneur. But how are you going to be purposeful in moving from step A to step B as pertains to reaching that goal? You have to put together a plan. You have to have goals that are tangible, but yet attainable. And Greg did a really good job of crystallizing that for the young men, but also lighting that fire in that, you don't have forever to accomplish these goals. We all know young men who turn into middle-aged men who ultimately become old men and are still talking about their goals that they set 25, 30 years ago. And so what Greg did was he streamlined that process for the young men from a visual perspective, and he presented it in a very real way. And that's one thing, Greg, he coins himself as the master of real talk, but it's not just a moniker, it's not just a title, it's something that he lives and breathes every day. So I appreciate that about him.
That's an awesome endorsement. And that's actually an excellent segue into speaking on his interaction, with the students and the ability to connect with the students, on that level where they can relate to him, and actually listen to him because he's not that far away. So if you could you speak specifically on your experience and you watching him interact, with different students and how his ability to connect with them so well and how that's impacted the students?
Well, Man Up, we kind of did a spinoff of the high school entity, which is Man Up, and we formed a new student organization here at the college where Greg actually was our inaugural president. As a matter of fact, around this time of year, around May of 2011, I believe it was, Greg was in my office and he said, one of the goals that I have is to really reach out in a very meaningful way to the young men at this college. I said, well, how do you plan on doing that? Well, I heard you all have this Man Up program and you've been trying to get it off the ground for a couple of years, but nothing's really come to fruition. I'm your guy. He had enough confidence in himself to say, I'm your guy, and guess what? I'm going to take a lot of the legwork out of your hands as a college liaison, and as a student, I'm going to take ownership of this project. And I appreciated that about him because I didn't have to micromanage Greg when it came to forming the Man Up organization at the college level. He sat down, put together a proposal for each week. There was going to be a different topic that the young men on campus would talk about. We would bring in guest presenters. There would be an agenda. There would be elections. He put together the Constitution and bylaws. I mean, these are all things that, with most students, I have to hold their hands through the entire process. But Greg really took the reins, and by the time he gave me the draft back, there were very few edits that I had to make to that particular document. And so executing the Man Up program that fall was very simple because of the work that he put in during the summer. And I see that same work ethic translating to so many other aspects of his life. And that's why his message resonates so well with the young men, because he's speaking from a place of experience. When he says, I want to see your transcript, it's because he's willing to show you his own transcript. When he says, you can get yourself off of academic probation, he's speaking from a place of experience because he's experienced academic hardship, as did I, and that message resonates more potently with someone who has actually experienced it. So I think that students understand that he's coming from a very genuine place when he speaks. He's not talking at you; he's working with you. Yeah, and as a young man, we have a lot of pride. We don't want anybody talking at us.
We do.
Yeah, that's why folks perceive that we have issues with authority, because authority figures oftentimes talk at you. They're very dogmatic. Individuals who are credentialed can be very pretentious, and as Greg has elevated up the personal and professional ladder, both here at the college and out in the work world, he's never changed. His lens is still coming from the perspective of someone who's been there, someone who's been in the trenches, who understands the challenges and was able to overcome them. And because he was able to overcome them, he's empowered, and he feels the need and the obligation to empower others. And that's what I think works so well with the young man.
That's excellent. That's excellent. Well, when you see, a young man, before, Greg has interacted with them and worked with them and helped them develop as men and students, and after Greg has worked with them, as men and students, after spending time with them, is there a difference between the two? Have you seen a difference? And if you have, could you provide some examples of that difference before Greg, was able to work and develop the student and afterwards?
Well, I think, inherently when you meet a new individual, especially someone who's had the experiences that Greg has had, both in life and, within the college realm, you're going to expand your social capital simply by knowing an individual of that caliber. If you are indeed a human sponge to someone who's able to give you fruit, then you're going to increase and improve your ability to maneuver throughout whatever endeavor it is you're looking to accomplish. And so I think that, inherently, the individuals who come in contact with Greg, they've been able to simply benefit by having Greg within their network. As the saying goes, your network is your net worth. And I believe that you should always have an individual within your network that's going to stretch you, that's going to allow you to grow. They're not going to patronize you when it comes to what you do well or what challenges you might have. And I believe that Greg's very real approach allows individuals within his circle to stretch. I can think of a situation last year where I actually had a student worker who was looking to start a similar organization for young women. And she and Greg had already been in contact. She'd been able to observe what he was doing with our Man Up program on campus. And she wanted to incorporate some of the same things into a program for young women. However, as we mentioned before, you take ownership of something and you really don't want to let go of the reins because you don't want anyone spoiling your baby. And so I think that was a big sticking point for her at that point in time. But through her conversations with Greg, she learned how to delegate. I think, it's not just important to have knowledge and to be able to share knowledge, but it's also important to be able to coach others on how to empower the masses. Because if we hold on to it, then when we move on to greener pastures or life circumstances change, then those programs die. Or they go dormant. And that's a very scary thing. We don't create initiatives so that 5 years down the line, they're no longer in existence. We create them for longevity because we understand that generation after generation, year after year, there's going to be a need. There's going to be young women and young men coming to that institution that need someone to grab their hand and say, "Okay, I see you going this way, but let me show you a better way."
Exactly.
And so by him sharing those experiences with her and sharing his vision for how he created and led the Man Up organization, her organization actually benefited from that. And she was able to empower other young women on campus. And so that's what, when we say expanding your reach, that's what expanding your reach is. It's not only sharing information, but empowering others to empower others. So mentoring the mentor, if you will. She considered herself to be a mentor and a leader on campus, but she herself needed some guidance. And Greg was able to provide that for her.
That's excellent. That's excellent. And I'm sure, other students have had that same story, Well, speaking, of endorsement and continuing to grow, would you yourself recommend Mr. Anderson for programs, developmental student services, to different corporations and schools, or have you, to do some of these services, can come provide some of these similar services that he has working with you, with the Man Up program, raise them up? would you recommend his services? And if you would, could you provide some reasons for it before we wrap up?
Well, schools are very guarded, and in any educational institution, they're very guarded about who they bring within their doors. They're always concerned about, what's the message? Is there an underlying meaning behind this message? Does this person have the best interests of our particular student population at heart? And are you really being genuine in what it is you're looking to deliver or what you're selling? And we're all salesmen to a certain extent, not just because our businesses may be a for-profit entity versus a non-profit entity or what have you, but we're salesmen because we're trying to get people to buy into concepts. Mm-hmm. And when you talk about the concept of empowerment through education, Greg is a great carrier of that message. He's a vessel, and he's a vessel for students who may or may not have had models in their lives to show them what it means to be a successful student, what it means to be a confident student, what it means to have self-worth and self-efficacy, what it means to be self-motivated. And so when you have a community of individuals who may be devoid of those skills, then selling confidence, selling a collaborative spirit, selling growth, selling self-worth is very easy. Mm-hmm. It's like selling water to folks in the desert. Ultimately, I think that what he's selling is value added to any community, organization, be it a church, community center, youth group, school, whatever the case may be, because we understand that all of our students are not necessarily on an equal playing field. Some are coming from single parent households, some are coming from no parent households, some are the head of household. Mm-hmm. And so it's important that we have great mentors in our communities who are willing to give of themselves, not because they're looking to make a buck, but because they truly want to see individuals be empowered. Mm-hmm. And so for that reason alone, I would have no issue with bringing Greg in to speak to a group of students that I'm mentoring or I'm working with. We've done it before, and he's delivered the goods. And so ultimately, it's a non-issue when Greg calls and says, hey, I got a program for you. And that's one thing I'll say. He didn't wait for you to come to him. Yeah. He'll give you a call and say, hey, I've had this program on my mind. I've been thinking about talking to the youth about this, that, or the third. And if we see the value added in it, which 9.9 out of 10 times we do, then we're going to bring them on board. Absolutely.
That's excellent. Well, I appreciate your time, sir. It's always a pleasure speaking with you.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Yes, sir.